Hello, Westchester. It's Ryan, your host of the podcast, Westchester Informed. We are on our third episode now, and I have with me as a guest Cathy Kuratko, who is a trustee here in the village. Right off the bat, as I do normally, I want to address that I'm not affiliated with the village by any means. I'm independent, and the intention behind this podcast was to give residents a voice as well as give the village a voice so that we could talk longer and more thoughtfully about the issues that come up. And when I started this podcast idea, I had no idea that home rule would come onto the ballot, and it became pretty serious to get this going. So I wanted to make sure I did that. And so if you've been following us on Facebook, that's pretty much where I'm putting it out right now. So you can go to Facebook and go to Westchester Informed. That's the page. As well, I've been posting it in the Westchesterians, Westchester Citizens Group, and the Parents Group. So you can find me on there. I am Ryan Joseph on Facebook. And then I'll be putting these through YouTube. So I'm basically putting a static image and then having the podcast voiced as a video through YouTube. So you can subscribe there. That's probably one of the best ways to get these, is to subscribe through YouTube as well, and then you get a notification when these come out. One thing I wanted to quickly address is I did have someone mention in regard to the contributions. Look, there's no revenue stream here. Podcasts, as you may or may not know, don't really have a monetization. They're intended, I think, for a lot of entertainment and information-based sort of radio broadcasts over the internet, but they need support in some way. And I started out this thing with the intention that it was going to be great for the village, and it is, and that's still my intention. I really care about getting this into everybody's ears so that they can understand more about these big issues, and even the smaller, more fun ones that I plan on doing. But I did want to mention that in terms of me self-sponsoring for now and asking for any kind of contribution, I think that is, I want you to have the best understanding of my intention there, because we as a village and as residents need to make sure, especially with home rule, getting this out there can be more difficult than just throwing it on Facebook. And so there has been nothing in the newsletter, as you know, and there will be, and that's fine. But one of the things that I think we need to address is getting this out to the households, and we can do that in a number of ways. We can do it through the newsletter, which costs money. We can do it as postcards, which cost money. So that's sort of my idea, and I know that it's quick, and I know that it probably should happen as quickly as we can, and I'm working to try to get these podcast episodes recorded quickly so that we have the content we need for people to make the decision on this. So that's the idea. Don't think there's any ill will or intention to get rich. There's no revenue stream here, really. Even as you look at like a podcast that's reaching 8,000 people, and that would be best case scenario with this as it grows. There's still, whether it's YouTube or Facebook, there's no ability to really make any money here that would be substantial in any way. So if you feel like contributing, I appreciate it. You can go onto Facebook and you can click on it's a shop now button, but that's the only way that Facebook really allows you to link to PayPal so you can contribute. You can also do that in the YouTube videos. I have links that will direct you straight to PayPal. Or you can just simply, for right now, I'm my only sponsor. You can go to Pravda LLC. That's the name of my company. I'm a real estate company. I do home sales. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, or if you're looking to renovate a home or rehab a home in any area, that's what I do. So I buy my own properties, investment properties, and flip them. And I have my license at Long Realty in Westmont. So, okay, so we got that out of the way. And I do not know much about Cathy, but that's the point. It's good because I'm curious, and full disclosure, we've sat here for almost 20 minutes just chatting it out, and it sounds like she's bringing the same passion and the same intentions to this village that we're looking for and that the others have expressed. So I'm excited to hear that, and I'm excited for you to hear what she has to say in terms of these kind of hard issues and topics like home rule. So let's learn a little bit more about her. Cathy, how are you?
I'm great, thank you.
Good. So let's start, just because I don't know. We didn't really talk about this. We jumped right into the main issue, but have you always lived in Westchester? Tell me a little bit about how you came to
I
to
have not.
Westchester? Okay.
My husband and I moved to Westchester about 15 years ago. I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago, and he grew up in Riverside. And when we were looking for a home, we had some friends that lived in Westchester, and we liked how centrally located Westchester was. You're close to so many major expressways, um, and we just kind of fell in love with the community. Initially, it was going to be our starter home, and we're still here, and have no intention of going anywhere. We now have two children, two boys, 11 and 9,
Nice.
and are here to stay.
Yeah, good. I hear that they've been ill a little bit, or
They
one of
have,
them,
yes,
or
the flu hit, no, everybody, the flu hit our house.
yeah, I have a 6 and 4 year old, so I know how that can be. It just spreads and then it doesn't go away because it just keeps spreading around and
Right.
around and around. So yeah, so it sounds like you've been here for a while then, and it sounds like the story is familiar because a lot of us that are here and stay here have that same feeling. Like you come here and you like the village and how centrally located it is, and you just get to know
And then the
people, and you get,
the
yeah,
people
you know.
are really the true treasure, I think,
Yeah,
here.
yeah. And I know when we looked up and down our street, and when we were looking to move from our starter home into a bigger home, and we looked into certain streets even and things, and there was just it didn't matter. We didn't really care where we went in Westchester. It was just as long as we stayed in Westchester. So um, cool. All right. Well, then tell me a little bit about the story of becoming trustee. How
Sure.
did that happen?
Sure. So I never had any political aspirations. I still don't. But I did. I served a 4-year term on the library board, so I guess that was probably my um, introduction to politics. At the time, I really didn't view it that way. It was more of a volunteer opportunity, and I enjoyed it. But more recently, in becoming interested in being on the village board, really it goes back to a couple of years ago. I started coming to meetings, talking with Frank about different things that were going on at the village, and it was pretty eye opening. I had seen instances where residents would come and approach the board with concerns and issues, and then surprised as either action was not taken or the opposite action of what the residents wanted
Sure.
was taken, and I didn't think that was right. And and then there was a point in time where um, the village was operating without financials for 10 months. And I have a finance and real estate background, and to me that was just um, unacceptable.
Yeah.
So rather than complain about it and then just go up and comment at board meetings and complain about it, I felt like this was a way that I could do something about it. I felt like the residents um, deserved board members who would truly listen to them, and that could contribute. Like I just mentioned, my background is in finance. I had in my over my career managed multiple multi-million-dollar budgets at a time, and felt that um, you know could help contribute to getting the village on the right track in terms of finances. So
Okay.
yeah, I put in the time, and that I think that kind of was what brought Frank, Tracy, and I together in our Westchester Residents First Party to run in this last election.
Okay. Has it been has it been as daunting or overwhelming as you? I mean, not that I don't want to make it seem like that's what you're saying, but I mean, has it been
Yeah,
what you thought? You know what I mean? When what you thought it would be when you?
so I think there's a lot of time involved in it, which I was expecting. Um,
Is it a paid position?
it is a paid position. The trustees get 5,000 a year. Um,
Okay.
not sustainable for us.
Some things I know, but other people might not. So it's
Sure.
just one of those things I want to make sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I don't consider it daunting. I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I feel like it's, we are out there trying to better the community that we all live in. And so I don't think um, I don't think of it as a daunting task. I think of it as a challenge, and we're going to figure out a way how to solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, good. Yeah, I mean, at least it sounds like that's also a theme that's running through these episodes is the idea that things everybody wants things to be better, and in doing that, there has to be real change. And
Absolutely.
we were just talking about one of those cases recently, and we didn't expand upon this, and someone actually asked the question on Facebook, and I realized I should have expanded on that with Frank, but the fire sprinkler system issue was also what lit a fire under me to do this, is that something was going on with the board for that to move so quickly, and I'd never seen that with a permit and with that kind of a process yet, and I've lived here for 11 years.
Well, because I think we truly want
yeah
listening to what the residents want. I mean,
right.
We had
that should say something. Yeah.
A resident that came to a board meeting. We had another resident that emailed us about the topic. I know that Frank received a phone call from another resident about it, and so it needed to be addressed.
Yeah.
And
the idea is that state I want to make sure I'm getting this right, that state code requires that any new construction have a fire sprinkler system, but that pertains to new construction residential and
not additions.
Not additions.
Correct.
So what needed cleared up in terms of?
So previously, a previous administration had added additional requirements over and above what the state requires. Okay. So that would require anyone who was increasing the size of their home by 50% or greater, and that's not counting the basement. So essentially, if you're putting on an addition, you needed to add a sprinkler system, and that's not part of the current state requirement. So we were reversing that, or we reversed that. Yeah. So now the requirement is consistent with the state requirements that only new construction would require a homeowner to add a sprinkler system.
Yeah, and that's my world, and so it's one of those things where I've always felt from village to village that I've worked in probably 11 different villages and municipalities in terms of renovation and homes, and so it's sometimes you see a village that encourages the permitting process because of how they handle it, and some villages you see it really discourage, and you have a lot more riffraff because people just don't want to deal with that process. And that was one of the sort of disheartening things that I didn't want to see happen with Westchester. Is I'm like, man, I was here when inspectors were in-house, and then I've been here while they're not in-house, and it's a firm that's been hired out or whatever. So it's like I've seen both sides of it, and it's my understanding, at least of psychology, that sometimes if you give people an easy route, they'll take it. And sometimes I felt like that's what was happening, at least in terms of both revenue and the permitting process, is that we've made it somewhat cumbersome and then somewhat expensive for people to do that, even though that is necessary to have revenue for the village. But it's like, one instance, I think I came in for a driveway all I was doing is putting another layer on the driveway, and it was like over $100 or something. And I said, there's no way that that the surrounding villages have that kind of a requirement. And she said, yeah, we're competitive. And I said, okay. And I went out to my car and I sat there and I called the 5 or 6 villages in the immediate surrounding area and asked them what a permit for resurfacing a driveway was, and found that they were 50 to 70% lower than our fee. And so it's not that I don't want to contribute to the village in those ways. It's that I don't want to see people discouraged to get permits because we're not focused on safety issues, and we're not you know what I mean? We're not.
Right. No, and I agree.
We seem too focused on the money aspect of it rather than the actual safety aspect of it. And we've had to overcome some of those things just in my projects when it's like we need to be cut a break in order to even have something that is really not that much of a safety issue be given to us, like leeway or something.
Well, and I think bringing it back in house, which we've recently done. We used to have the outside company that would do our code enforcement. I think bringing it back in house will also help with that consistency. And issues like this, we can be made more aware of if you have the same person that's working with the residents.
Yeah.
And absolutely, we want to encourage people to improve and develop their properties, not deter it.
Yeah, and
overall, I think that's more value to the village than the fees that it's going to collect for those improvements.
Right. Yeah, I just think in some cases you could collect more in fees in a sense because more people will come in and say it's not that big a deal, it's not that bad of a process,
Right.
and they're very fair. They're focused on the safety of what you're doing and not gotcha, and that's the thing. And so, but then there's also consistencies. Expansion tanks on water heaters was one of them back in the day where it's like, do you need them? Do you not? Well, this inspector just decides that he wants to enforce that, or this village decides they want to or don't want to enforce that. So there's just no consistency either, which I don't expect there to be from municipality to municipality, but at least within the village, it may or may not be so clear cut as to what is required and what isn't required. And then, for a village to say, well, we understand that can be a confusion, but
well, and we are in the process, and I'm going to be in the process over the next in the coming months of revising the code or updating the code. So if you see any of these things that you think we need to be made aware of.
Yeah, no, I would definitely bring it up or do what I could. And I say that with the complete understanding that I haven't in the past, and that's one of the things. You can get it, like I've mentioned in the last podcast and stuff, you can get a ticket for not having a vehicle sticker in your driveway, and then the village can say, well, we can even mail you one. You don't even have, we don't even have to go out. We can just look it up, and it's like, okay, I understand that, but if you want to implement some sort of change, not saying getting rid of vehicle stickers, but just understanding that process, that's just one little thing. And then the permitting, and it adds up as a resident to the point where you're living a busy life and you want to take care of your family and all this other stuff. And then you think about the idea of coming to a meeting and then what it might take. And I think it's appealing and encouraging to know that things can get done that quickly, like the sprinkler systems and stuff, the changes like that it would encourage people to show up. And
well, and even you don't even necessarily have to come to a meeting. Email us or call any of the board members, and we can bring it forward on your behalf.
Yeah, that's good. I mean, and I was told more people were at the meeting about the electronic sign on the church than the marijuana dispensary issue, and just these issues that you would think would be very polarizing didn't seem to be. And so you never really know what people are gonna.
Is surprising sometimes.
Yeah, well, and Facebook just said it.
Might be more important to people.
Yeah, and with the last Facebook post I saw about there being a low attendance at the last meeting, and it's like, what do we do? What do we do to really make sure that people understand? And you hate to, like you say, you hate to spoon feed. If you don't want to go out and find out what's going on, then that's sort of your own fault. We all kind of have to take responsibility for finding out what's going on. But you ask somebody, as we delve into the real topic here, you ask somebody about home rule and what do they have to go on, and if they're not exhausted by the rhetoric, or if they're not willing to do the work to understand it, then what resources are out there and who are they listening to? And if they're listening to just their neighbors or Facebook or anything else, then there might be a lot of misinformation, and there might be a lot of times where you guys feel frustrated by being misinterpreted or misunderstood. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that is driving this is the idea that we could possibly have these conversations where they're not, I'm sorry, but they're going to be over an hour. You cannot just, mention an issue and have it be washed out like that. And it just,
sure.
So that being said, I mean, home rule, and I don't know if many people have listened to the previous ones or not. And so just again, to recap, home rule, and sort of its definition. So a home rule unit may exercise any power and perform any function pertaining to its government and affairs, including but not limited to the power to regulate for the protection of the public health, safety, morals, and welfare, to license, to tax, and to incur debt. And so, in talking with the others about each one of those different separate issues, obviously taxing is the one that comes up first and foremost, and home rule powers give the ability to tax in certain areas in different ways. And I have information here that says that at least one of those tax being a real estate transfer tax. And I talked about this. A lot of villages do that. They require a transfer tax for when you buy or sell real estate. And so I was alerted to home rule by a fellow realtor. And so It's always interesting to see people's motivations. I should have tried. I think this is true, and I want to make sure that I get this right. But a real estate transfer tax cannot be passed even in a home rule community without a referendum. So still a tax that may not necessarily be able to be implemented just by giving home rule. So I don't necessarily think that should be something that should be confused. But I also want to make sure that, at least what I'm getting my information from is the Citizen Advocacy Center. So, if anybody else out there has any information on that or understands that better, and, obviously being a realtor, I'm going to call up the realtor, the National Association of Realtors, or the Main Street organization might know something about that, because home rule obviously is something that's been implemented across a number of different municipalities. So how and when a real estate transfer tax gets put in place is something. But there's food and beverage, amusement, a number of different ways in which you can tax once you do have home rule. So the $1 million question is, in your opinion or in your thoughts, what would be out of the gate that you can think of that would be something that an area which we need to be able to collect revenue or to increase our revenue?
Well, I think one benefit of being a home rule community, currently we collect hotel motel tax, and right now it's it fluctuates a bit, but right now it's about $200,000 a year that we expect to collect. However, as a non-home rule community, we can only use those funds to promote tourism. So things that are currently funded right now from the hotel motel tax that's collected are the monthly newsletter that goes out, and then some events such as the fest, and any other events, will contribute towards the Christmas event that the Park District puts on. So in all of those funds aren't necessary to put on those events, the funds that we collect. So we could redirect some of those funds, if we were a home rule community, to other areas, such as street improvements or alley improvements. So I see that as one benefit.
Okay, let me clarify on that too. So then, are you saying when you collect $200,000 in any given year from that tax, if it isn't used, does it just? I mean, it just kind of has to sit there. I mean, it just has to sit there because it can only be used for certain things.
Correct.
Okay, very good point, I guess. So I don't think myself or a lot of people know the ins and outs of these types of rules, and you can sort of read about them, and you can understand how different communities have shifted the way in which they do their finances based on home rule, and some of those aren't the big ones. I hadn't heard that, so that's good to know.
I think another area where we could benefit would be gaming. Right now we collect
gambling. Call it what it is.
Gambling.
I hate the word gaming. It's not. You're not playing a game. You're dumping your money into a. I'm sorry, but she didn't say it. I did, but I'm just like. I think that's one of the things that we've talked about that does fire me up is gambling. I mean, I think it's something that it's okay. Everybody should be free to do what they want to do, but once
the fees we collect now are minimal.
Right. I understand that now, and I understand also that, I mean, that's an area where I think that if you have owners decide that they don't want to be in Westchester because of some tax that we put on them for that particular thing, then, I don't know. You'd have to, just like, I don't want this to be long or outstretched or a stretch, but one of the quick discussions that I saw before I came here was the idea that we're trying to tax people that come through Westchester or come to Westchester to do things, and we don't always know what that's going to be. And so if you have residents that are headed over to the gaming machine or gambling machine places, then fine, but how many of those people are coming in from out of town or from another area? Most of the areas that I've driven around sort of have one or two or more, and so
most of ours have 5 or 6.
most of the surrounding communities.
No, I'm sorry. The establishments that have gaming or the machines, will have. They can have now. They're allowed to have up to 6.
6 machines.
Correct.
I'm saying the places in which people can visit.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I'm just saying like you have to realize that it's not always going to be people that are coming in from out of town or a different area to go specifically to that, unless that's their favorite or they think they're going to win on that machine.
Sure.
So if they decide they want to go somewhere else, I say fine. You know what I mean? And I'd hate to hurt the village by having that go away in terms of that revenue or that tax, or leave something vacant and have that be a problem. But it's like, smoking or drinking. It's like, why are we encouraging, we hate to encourage things that might hurt the community. And in some ways, those are the things, smoking and drinking and dumping your money where it shouldn't go.
I mean, they're all legal. So
I know. So
I think, adding even a small tax, if you were to add another penny on the gas tax, or, same with tobacco or liquor sales, I don't know that the consumer would really feel the impact, and you have to also keep in mind that there's other communities that are also imposing those taxes. So I don't feel that it would deter people that would normally shop or spend their money in those ways from doing so.
Yeah, and so like Mariana's, for instance, 50% of people that shop at Mariana's are actually from the village. Okay. And so those are going to be taxes that hit those people. But like you said, you're not saying, at least from what I'm hearing, most people say is this isn't something that is aimed at nickel and diming people, and you're not being like harsh when you say that you don't think people will feel that. I mean, it's still a cost that they incur.
Sure.
But what you're saying is that at least it's a choice. And
correct. I mean, I think the last thing that we want to do, the last thing that I want to do is to go to the residents as a whole and ask them for more money via an increase in real estate taxes.
Right. Then they have to.
Right.
You know what I mean? And then, and that's what Frank was saying, is that seniors, for instance, on a fixed income, I mean, now you have to pay more versus if you're shopping and you're paying 2-3 cents more, whatever it is. It's just making sure that actually is for the good of the community circles back to the people we have in charge, trusting them and making sure that the intentions are there, and that if and I want you to talk about you said that
safeguard?
if there's a safeguard, and I could tell you in my research too, there was another community that put that safeguard in place. In fact, let me see if I can even find this and read it, because it was very interesting to see that there were case studies in which they were talking about the things that make home rule significant for the decision, at least. And one of those is this. I have a star by it here, but communication with stakeholders is critical for communities weighing the possibility of pursuing home rule status through a voter referendum. And once secured, home rule can offer officials and administrators powerful tools to tackle large infrastructure and budget challenges. This is finding 3 from the Illinois Municipal Policy Journal, and it's something that they're basically saying that I'll just read it. So an example of this can be found in the municipality of Highwood, a northern suburb of Chicago located in Lake County. And Highwood's village manager noted recently that his municipality held 2 home rule referenda that over the past 20 years, one in 1997 and later in 2006. The first was unsuccessful because, as the mayor at the time noted, officials wrongly believed that the need for home rule was a no-brainer. Officials and administrators did not make this mistake the second time, holding community meetings and interviewing business owners to communicate what home rule represented for the community. So I think what it's basically saying is that it's important to communicate what the intention is of passing home rule, and then I'll let you talk about a little bit of what you guys are thinking, which doesn't have to happen. I mean, at the end of the day,
Right.
it doesn't have to be put in place, but you care enough or want this to be something that's a safeguard. So,
Right, and I think the biggest concerns that we've been hearing from residents who are apprehensive about um, putting home rule in place is that the board um, it just has free reign to increase property taxes.
yeah, unchecked.
And that is absolutely the opposite of what we want to do. Um, we've it's also been said that many communities that have home rule property taxes stabilize or actually in some cases decrease. So I think in order to find a way to provide residents with comfort about our intentions, we talked about this at the last board meeting. So we should have an ordinance in front of us at the next meeting. But basically, if home rule were to be passed, we would have an ordinance in place on the books. So if our board, the existing board, or any future board, for the time that home rule is in place, decided that they were going to increase property taxes, which again is something that we're not looking to do, then every household would have to be notified of that intention, and the board would have to hold 3 consecutive meetings, giving residents the opportunity to approach the board and voice their concerns, voice their, whether they are in favor of or against that increase. They would be allowed to attend at one of those, or at those 3 meetings. And then what we're looking to go further is that if the board at that time did in fact move forward with increasing property taxes, it would automatically trigger placing home rule back on the ballot so that residents now would have the opportunity to take it away.
Okay. I think that's a good safeguard, and I think one of the things too that, well, and you said you were in finance, so I was thinking or have a background in that or whatever. So people were concerned. I think there's some people that are also concerned about just sort of where the money's going right now, and I think there's an idea that it may not be able, or it isn't. It could be shifted around in a way, or things could change in a way that makes the need for home rule not really that necessary. And so, I mean, could you speak a little bit, I guess, to that? I mean, like, I mean, just one of the things I saw on Facebook, so the gazebo and that kind of thing, like, is there areas that we're not sort of, we haven't gotten it all together yet?
I don't think so. So, with respect to the gazebo, that was my understanding is that was purchased from the hotel motel fund, which can only be used for certain things.
Okay.
But
Well, you mentioned like some of the holes that you saw in water billing
Oh,
and
correct.
different,
So-
you know what I mean? Like, I just don't, I want to represent the residents because it really feels like this is something that is not just the idea that it's happening quickly for them or whatever, but it's just that, like, how do we get things right? And if when we get things right, is it going to be like, well, we didn't have to do this? You know, I mean, I might be too simple with that. I might be simplifying it too much, but
Sure. So, our finances, I think we're not in a good place over the past however many years. Right now, I feel that there have been policy changes. We have uh, our village manager who has a strong background in finance. We have an in-house accountant in addition to him, where before this function was outsourced, and you didn't have the same investment as you would from your village employees. There were also several things discovered. I mean, there were overpayments that were made in prior years, there were under collections with, you mentioned the water billing situation.
Yeah.
So we do now have a lot of things straightened out that were not previously. And I think we are in a good place. We just completed our audit of last year's financials. So I think financially we're in a good place in the sense that our books are clean, and we know where the money is going and where it's coming from. But the problem of the infrastructure needs still exists, regardless of whether or not our books are in order. And home rule is something that could help with that, with these additional, with
Infrastructure needs.
Exactly.
I get what you're saying, and so that, and I think some people, at least even in my mind, it's like, well, it sounds like we got great people in place. It sounds like things are getting figured out. Why can't this wait? You know what I mean? Like, what powers is this giving the village that can address the issues now that couldn't wait? And is waiting going to be something that hurts us more? You know what I mean? Because we talked a little bit about that with the other podcast, how if you don't keep up on the maintenance with your car, eventually, and I know this from personal experience, you get hit with that big bill.
Right.
And you're like, okay, I should have just bit the bullet and spent the $40 for the oil change, because at the end of the day, it would have been better than if I would have, so essentially, this is a terrible analogy, but it's like we're giving you the power to take the car and go give it an oil change, than try and, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it's like,
no, that's exactly it. I mean,
you guys do it, and then you don't have, listen, we're doing the things that have to be done, in order to make sure that 2 years from now we're not asking for home rule in a worse situation. Can you, like?
Well, right. I mean, so our infrastructure is old. I mean, I'm sure you see these water main breaks around town all the time, or see them on Facebook, another water main break.
Yeah.
We need to be investing in improving these things now. We did recently bring forward a bond refinance. So we will have some funds that we can utilize for street and alley improvements, which is great. And that's, again, not imposing any additional tax on the residents. But there are so many things like this, that will only take us so far. So
Yeah.
instead of having to constantly, I know, it was brought up at the last board meeting, well, why don't we just go to referendum and ask the residents for funds to do our streets? Well, we don't want to do that. I mean, if we could find ways.
But you are doing that. You know what I mean? Like,
well,
I'm saying this is how people need to be thinking about it, because this is how I'm hearing it. You are asking for that because you're asking for the power to shift funds around and to do taxes that may give a chance for it not to come directly from the residents. So, would you rather have to decide to just give the money, or would you rather, give the power for them to know what needs done, and then there be a check and balance, like you mentioned, on that power? And I don't know. I'm trying to summarize a little bit of just what the.
Yeah, I'd rather it not hit every resident.
Yeah.
If we go to referendum, well, there's a chance that the residents will vote no.
Yeah.
And then the funds won't exist at all.
Yeah. And if you go to referendum, then how would you get that money? How would you be asking for a tax increase, a real estate tax, or
well, there's
property
also,
tax? I mean, or
yeah, and you could also issue new debt as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the big things that I think they talk about in some of the research I did on home rule, is it takes away the limit on debt, for a non-home rule community. From my understanding right now, is 8.25% or something like that of your.
Well, but there's also a benefit, because when you are borrowing money, you can borrow at more favorable interest rates too.
Right. I did read that. Okay, so.
and there's in addition to the financial aspect of it, there's other issues that came up. For instance, we had the dog attacks last year, and I think residents were frustrated because the village could only act in accordance with, what the state would allow. We couldn't impose higher penalties, or the village could not impose higher fines or penalties against the dog owners who were involved in the attack, or impose any additional restrictions outside of what the state allowed, to try and eliminate that from happening again, or encourage it from happening again.
It was just funny because if it was up to the state, you'd think they would impose a fine or a something anyway. I mean, the state seems like
well, and I think that also is a big part of this. Is the state you have, who's now dictating what we can and can't do, and they don't live here. So I think it makes more sense for the people that live here and can hear what the residents are saying and what they want to be making more of the decisions than the state.
Yeah. No, and I think that goes back to the history. A lot of people don't know the history of home rule and the fact that it was pushed forward because people were having to go all the way into city of Chicago or to the county to try to push for the things that they needed in their village and to get them to do that, whether it was by referendum or any other way. And so you have, millions or hundreds of thousands of people, cities or villages or municipalities that are deciding how other smaller 5,000 person villages are being run. And it's like, well, we need the freedom or the flexibility to do this or this based on what type of residents we have or what they're doing. Or, like Westchester, we talked about it being more of a bedroom community or bed community. It's like we don't have a lot of retail here. So this, from my understanding at least, it may free up a little bit more ability to do that. But my question, because there is the TIF thing, and we talked a little about this before the podcast started, that the TIF is great because I think it would allow for, while the taxes would be frozen, it would allow for retail and developers to come in and say there's an incentive now to build and to do things in Westchester. Great. And we could make up for some of those sort of property tax freezes and losses in retail taxes, right? Or sales taxes and things. Okay. So, but that doesn't happen overnight like we talked about. And so I think people would want to understand that our situation may be a little bit more critical now, and tying the two together in the sense that, home rule might give the freedom to add on to that in terms of sales tax or in terms of the taxes we talked about already. That might be an add-on or an on top of that sort of TIF situation that's trying to spur the development. So it doesn't sound like a problem that's going to get fixed overnight either way. You know what I mean?
Correct.
Whether we implement home rule or whether we, it's just not an easy answer right now, just based on where we are. And
right. I mean, so the the TIF should be officially in place in April. But then, we've had conversations with developers who've expressed interest. But then, that all takes time for developers to come in and then redevelop. That you could be looking at years before you see.
Yeah, I talked about that with Frank. I mean, I know that enough about that to sound stupid when it comes to the developer side of that. But then because you have, it's not as easy as just saying, okay, we've offered a TIF district and that incentivizes them to come in. Now, what do they want to do? And then you have pushback from that, like, well, that's too close to this, or there's not enough setback, or it's just, there's a lot that goes into it. And I think if there's anybody out there that questions it or doesn't understand it, I think it's good to have somebody explain at least that just there is a lot to it. I mean, it's hard to go into every detail to explain what goes into it, but it is. And imagine being a resident that then now has an objection to the developer and what they want to do, then that pushes it back and takes longer. And so I don't know, just in thinking about the TIF and having that spur economic development where we can reap some of those extra taxes, will that fill the hole, and will it, will it do what we're trying to accomplish without home rule? And it just doesn't seem like it.
Well, it's not going to happen overnight.
Yeah.
The TIF, I think we, I think our vision is to have mixed use developments up and down Roosevelt Road in that TIF district. So it would generate additional sales tax income and things like that.
Yeah.
But
more revenue to the hotel motel, which you can only use to put out a newsletter or buy a gazebo. Right. I mean, I'm just trying to put it in perspective for people, because it's like, this isn't an easy thing. I've never, you said, you mentioned that you never thought of yourself as being in a government role, and I say that now, and it's like, I also said there was a time when I said I wouldn't ever get married, and I'm married with 2 kids.
Right,
so it's just, we can't, sometimes life is like that. Like
political. I didn't see myself.
Just in the
political aspirations,
yeah.
But
life's like that, you say, nah, not going to do it, and then you get drawn in, and you get. I think that the good thing is that it seems like the people that I'm talking to are getting drawn in for some of the right reasons, and so.
Well, I think we have a common goal, and that is to improve things at the village level that need to be improved, and make this the best community for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that's good. I think that's something that we're getting more and more of the more we do these, and the more people listen to that. I'm hoping they're able to understand that too. Not because I necessarily care one way or the other right now. I'm doing the work, hopefully, or we're doing the work, even listening to this or doing this, to understand it more first. And so whether you're for it or against it, and I mentioned this a little bit in Frank and I's talk, that the reason also why this was interesting to me is because I think that there's a lot of people out there that just want to do what they want to do, and they're sort of exhausted by the rhetoric. And I was kind of one of those people, where you're put in, especially when it comes to national politics, you're put in this whirlwind, and society right now seems to be so tribal and so segregated in that way, and just people really believe what they believe, and they're part of this group or that group, or they name it, and all this other stuff. And so I think we got surprised by people that supported Trump but didn't want to say it or didn't talk about it, and that can happen. And I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. What I'm saying is you have to be able to tap into that psychology, and to be able to say, here's something that you can listen to while you're working out, you decide, and now you're informed. You don't have to be somebody that pounds the drum and comes to every board meeting, and it's good, you should, and I should too, but I don't know if I'm going to do it. And right. I'm just being honest. Who knows? And I want to care about the issues, but I don't want to show up at the board meetings and really get involved. And that's, in some ways, it's so cool that we have the ability nowadays through social media and through other platforms to be able to if they're willing to find out what they need to find out and formulate an opinion without the need for that. And it's kind of like the same reason why we can shop online versus having to go out to the store. Okay, sure. Society's gotten to be what it is. You don't have to make the effort, but don't be completely ignorant and uninformed. And so
well, and we did have and I know I've seen on Facebook that some people seem surprised about this, and kind of that it's their first time hearing it mentioned.
Okay.
But we have been talking about it for months at the board level, at public meetings. We had a speaker come to one of the meetings and talk about it, and we are going to have another town hall coming up here on March 1st. So we have had Facebook posts about it. So I know not everyone's on Facebook, not everyone comes to meetings, and we do need to do a better job at getting the message out. We have made some improvements there. We created a village Facebook page. We did put some additional information about home rule on our website.
Now I want to address that because I think that people don't necessarily always understand what you can and can't do as a village. And just you mentioned that you can't put anything for or against
use tax dollars to promote or dissuade people from to
right.
try and encourage people to vote one way or the other.
Right. But so when it comes to the Facebook page and things like that, like, are there
I can
restrictions
talk
on?
as a resident.
Okay. So there's
About my
is there village restrictions as to what you can put out? Like, so you make a Facebook page, but is that's from the village, or is there restrictions as to what you can put on that page in terms of what? I mean, it's very easy for someone, even in my talks and stuff, you can go ahead and disseminate it however you want.
Sure.
And just like I was saying, some people hear excuses when they want to hear excuses, and they hear good reasoning when they want to hear good reasoning. And it's like you go through all this information and you can spin it, and that's just the way the world of media is now. And so what you can and can't say or put out there, I'm not making excuses for you guys. I think that there should have been at least an announcement of it, if anything, just to say, hey, home rule will be on the ballot, in this upcoming election, or this at this time, or whatever it is. I mean, whatever you could have said, I think you should have said in November, December, and January.
So we did at meetings, because we had a vote for it to be on the ballot.
Yeah,
so we did, and we did post those meetings on Facebook.
Yeah.
But for instance, we can't send out a mailer using village tax dollars.
Yeah.
About it.
It's such a messy, let's face it, it's such a messy issue because look, you could have people go to the meetings and then they know. You could say we're having a meeting and we're talking about this, and people go, oh, okay, and then their kid spills the milk and they're off, and that's the last they hear about it, or they do anything about it until the last minute, or until it really comes down to it, and then they say, well, I never heard of that. So I mean, I kind of get how people are, and I get how you're kind of in a tough position sometimes too, but could there have been more? Who knows? Because you have these different places where people are gonna, people might hear this, and that might be the only information they ever get about it. They might not dig any deeper. They might be on Facebook or not be on Facebook. And my family is one of those. I literally just sent off the YouTube link to my father-in-law because he doesn't have Facebook. He doesn't, there's no other way for him to listen to this and understand the same questions he's asking me are washed out in this conversation. And so I'm sending him those, and he's saying, well, how come there wasn't anything in the paper? And it's like, well, they're limited, and I agree there probably should have been, but I don't know. I'll ask.
There will be something in the March edition before the vote takes place.
But again, I mean, the newsletter sits on my table for a few weeks before I read it, and we all have our habits, we all have our ways in which we get information, and part of that, I think, that struggle, I understand it, and I'm only just empathizing with it because I think people are caught up and exhausted with the national situation, that it's hard to have bandwidth for all of it. You're working, you got kids, you got national politics in your face every day, you got bad news and good news, and you're trying to focus, and you're trying to deal with your own mental overload and issues, and I think just more of us, and I was bantering with Frank about even wanting to start a podcast like this, or like a different type of podcast where you come together, two very, very different people come together and talk it out and find, like, there just needs to be more conversation. And I think people would understand that we're not so different, we're not so far apart, but it's just that idea of just everything has to be a debate, and there has to be, oh, you're immediately put into this category or this label, and you're like, but what if I'm not, and what if I'm open to not being, or what if I'm open to changing my mind? Well, then how do you do that? And there might be some ego involved where people don't want to change their mind and have that be known, because they're like, oh, well, you were a Republican and now you're a Democrat. You were for home rule, now you're against it. It's like,
but
just give people that.
I think you touched on something because, I mean, I think having conversations are huge.
Yeah.
I mean, even with one another, we don't always agree.
Yeah.
But hashing it out and trying to see the other person's perspective, I think goes a long way.
Are there any home rule powers that you think would be? Do you see anything coming up that would be dangerous or egregious or anything? I mean, you communicate with the trustees, and I think that's another thing that people want to know is how much are you guys talking to each other about where this is going to go? Because you have terms of 4 years, and let's just say all of you get elected again. I mean, you got one trustee who I'm anxious to talk to that was just appointed because it's midterm or whatever, and how much is there cohesion among what the intention is here instead of like we're gonna put a permit license on chickens now? Or
I think there's a lot of discussion.
Okay.
We all talk quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I think we have the same vision. There may be minor differences, but I can say with confidence that we're not looking to increase taxes. We're not looking to increase property taxes. So I know that at least seems to be the biggest concern with residents, and that's I live here too. I don't want my property taxes to go up.
Yeah.
So
do you shop at Mariano's and
I do.
Jewel
I shop at all of them. Yeah.
I made that connection a little bit just in the sense that it feels as though you're. I wasn't always like this. I feel more so now, and maybe that's just because I'm getting older. Maybe that's because I've delved into the issue enough to soften my position. But it's like you're contributing to your neighborhood and your village when you shop locally and do business locally and all that good stuff. And so, that tax that is put on that, nobody likes it. But it's at the end of the day, I'm almost more inclined. I read about the 3-cent tax in the agenda. Sorry, sidebar. That's the other thing. I think that we need to admit, and maybe I'm telling you this, but we need to, I think, admit in some ways that to the trustees that not everybody is just reading the agenda or wants to read an agenda. I think it's not that entertaining, or it's not that, I don't know. It's just not. It's not sexy enough to like really get into. And so when you say, "Well, we've talked about it at a lot of meetings and we've put it out on Facebook," well, I asked Frank the same question. How'd you put it out? Oh, we put agendas up there. I'm like, nobody wants to read an agenda. Like we don't. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what that answer is. But it's just like I know I didn't until now, and that was only because I had this idea. And now I'm reading the agendas, and now I see that there's a 3-cent tax that the state allows you on gasoline, and I'm like, well. So I have to drive down Roosevelt Road to another village or to Villa Park to get my gas. And
right, but a lot of the neighboring towns are doing the same thing. So
right, and so that's the point that once I started talking about it in house with some family members and stuff, it's like, but wait, that actually should encourage me to get my gas here, because then I know that we're having a tough situation, and I know that so and so's alley needs fixed. I don't live there. I don't have that direct impact of having an alley. But you know what? When I see people at the grocery store and they feel like they want to stay here and build up, and guess what? Now you have 10 homes on the street that have built up and that are increasing property values. It's like we all have to do this together. This isn't going to be something that's just, well, I don't live by an alley. I get it. So it's like I should be encouraged to get my tax here and shop here, even if the taxes are put in place. But I don't like it any more than anybody else does. I mean, let's be real. So it's like,
right.
So this has been really encouraging. It's been a really encouraging process as a resident to be able to come and sit down. And we're approaching an hour now, so I want to respect your time. And I think it's just been something that has been eye-opening, not only just for me, but hopefully for everyone else that starts to really get into these, to know that we have people in place that care, to have people that want to do the right things and want to put checks and balances in place. I think that's everything, especially if anything, you focus on a local level and then don't focus so much on the national level, even though that's important too. When you focus on a local level, I think it's easier to control or to have some say and to be able to work with how things go, what goes on. And so home rule is a big issue. The marijuana dispensary is a big issue that we could certainly could get into and should get into, because that's on the referendum too, but it doesn't seem like there's as much
pushback
on that.
That one, we've already voted in favor of.
Sure.
But because we really do care what the residents think,
Yeah.
we are, we put an advisory referendum
Okay.
on the upcoming ballot. So
Okay.
the thought there was that, if we didn't touch enough residents during that whole process and
Yeah.
get input um, from the way that the majority felt,
Yeah.
that that could be a correction.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because I saw a lot of effort in that regard from Tracy and from some other people to find that out. And I'm certain that I want to be skewed in my understanding of the effort for that versus the effort for home rule. I think home rule is a much more serious power or process to be giving to the village than a marijuana dispensary.
Well, but I think it's different in some senses because with the marijuana dispensary, you're asking people to give you a yes or no, um, a yes or no answer. And yeah, there's reasons behind those answers for each person.
Yeah.
But with home rule, um, you're trying to, I guess, it's more informational, getting out the facts to people to let them know how we could benefit from it.
So what I hear you saying is that it's a more polarized issue, but it's also an issue that has much more to it than
Right.
do you want to have a dispensary that sells weed here? That's kind of like a pretty straightforward thing. I mean, there'll be some taxes from it, but the question would be how much and whether that's a benefit and does it actually bring in any riffraff and all those good
Right.
things. But it's so you're saying it's a little bit more straightforward, and I get that. And it's something that I think that we needed to find out. I mean, obviously you guys needed to know whether or not we were for or against it, but I don't know, just in case there's any idea out there or any thoughts out there that there was more of a push. I that's why I don't like Facebook, is I think it's algorithms that push what you're looking at and pushes that, there's a wizard, and it's like, it frustrates me all the time to think that people are getting this or this strong of an opinion or having their minds changed or having thoughts based on what they're interested in and what information they see. Because it could be very well that I say that you pushed harder to understand from the residents about marijuana dispensaries than home rule, but that might not be the case. I just might not have been looking in the wrong area,
Right.
And that's what's frustrating, is like, that's the push to work hard on this and to make sure that we have a place that we can stop looking at each other and having these trustees try to chime in. I mean, that's really what I see, is it's basically you and Frank and Nick and Tracy all trying to say, yeah, but
Well,
and be understood.
Too, so
yeah, how can you?
That's if we're either tagged in something or if we're on and reading it.
Yeah.
But we're not. We have full-time jobs and stuff too, so we don't always see it all.
Me too. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to address the contribution thing, is because I spent an hour reading comment after comment after comment, because as soon as somebody comments that's very polarized, boom, 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 and now you have 72 comments and 110 comments, and you literally have to read through them to really get a feel and understanding for the conversation and what people are thinking and where it's headed. And some people, they throw the absolute out there and it's over, they want to argue, and that's fine. But sometimes with Facebook, you have to go down that road completely in order to figure out finally what the conclusion was, or if there was one. And and sometimes it's just the same two people, and you're like, okay, I don't know if I want to keep reading this, because I know it's wasting time to looking at other things to see what other people are saying. So it's spread out, and I get that. And I don't know, hopefully this is bringing it into a more concise way in which you guys can express what you need to express, and the intention, and then also the information, and that way there's a place to go that kind of encompasses all of that without it being too noisy.
Well, thank you for doing this. I mean, this is, I realize how time consuming this is for you, but I think it is really valuable. And I would also encourage residents to always reach out to any of us via email or phone or whatever way.
No, that's good. All of you have said that, so I'm getting a great response from the trustees and from the people that matter to talk to about this, and so I think that's huge. And so it says something. It says something at least about what we have in place now, and hopefully residents see that. And so we'll wrap it up. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I really do. And if we need to, if it comes to it, and I see that there's a need to have a conversation with each and every one of you again, we will.
Yeah, please do.
But I think we've gotten a good basis of where each one of you is standing on these type of issues and where the intention is. You do seem very coordinated in that regard. I mean, whether you've been a trustee for 10 years or 11 years, or whether you just is your first year, you all do seem to have some cohesion on it. So that's another really positive aspect in my mind. Whether or not that means, whatever whether that means hand the home rule power yet or not, I don't know yet. But we'll keep going. We'll keep seeing what pans out, and just hopefully it's the best for the village. So that's it. I'll wrap it up, and I'll let everybody know again. Facebook is where we're posting these. I have a page on Facebook called Westchester Informed, so you can go there to get these updates, at least the podcast episodes. They're going to be through YouTube, so that's another great way to go and subscribe to YouTube, the YouTube channel, Westchester Informed, and so you can get the updates on these podcast episodes. And then I am, as of this point, not to hone on the issue, but it was brought up to me about the ask in terms of any kind of sponsoring or contribution. I'm just basically self-sponsoring. There's no revenue stream here, so I have to do what I have to do in terms of the time it takes to really make this what it can be, or what it should be. So there's some time involved, and I'd like more than that. I would like to get this into as many ears as possible for the good of this kind of a decision like home rule. So in doing that, you've got a couple different ways. You can put the ad into the newsletter in March. I'm trying to get that established as quickly as I can. I don't know if I missed the deadline or not, but I'm going to try. And then the other way is postcard. I've heard it a lot on Facebook or wherever that every resident should get a postcard or should get a mailer about it. And guys, that's 55 cents. If you're going legitimate as far as postal cost, that's 55 cents a mailer. And I've seen and heard of real estate agents that spend $2,000 to $3,000 on advertising for that purpose. But it's not here. So I count on you guys to spread this message or to spread these podcasts. And hopefully that goes well and we continue to grow this. So I appreciate it a lot. I do. And yeah, we'll see you. The next one, I believe, will be Tracy. So we'll try to sit down in front of Tracy Markey, get her thoughts, and we'll keep doing it. So thanks for listening. Appreciate it.